Welcome, everybody. Meeting of the School Modernization Committee. First agenda item is a roll call. Marilyn, will you do the call?
Ready to go. Okay, Matt Bowman. Rich Gussenberg.
Here.
Ann Harrigan.
Here.
Jim Jenks.
Here.
Andrew Martelli.
Here.
Renee Martinez.
Here.
Okay. Chuck Neff.
Here.
Sylvia Nichols. Sylvia here. Kate O'Donnell.
Here.
Jeff Pangaro.
Here.
Okay. Anthony Perugini
Here.
and Don Walsh.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Neff.
Very good. Thank you. Everybody stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everybody. All right, third item on the agenda, discussion regarding committee leadership. So as the committee is already aware, in a letter to the town council last week, Jen Bates resigned from the School Modernization Committee, citing the time commitment for the project and other personal reasons. So I would like to take a moment just to publicly thank her for her leadership and the time that she volunteered to the effort over the last several months and all the work that we put in. So thank you very much, Jen. As the vice chair of the committee, and then given the timeline, which we can talk about here and the next agenda item, I'll be serving as the chair. And is there any discussion or comment from the committee on leadership? Very good. All right.
Good luck, Chuck.
Seeing none, we will move on to item number 4 on the agenda. Discussion regarding the deliverable to the town council. So at our last meeting on February 17th, we had voted unanimously to request an extension of the town council deadline from what was previously today, March 1st. Since that meeting, the town council has not met or voted on the request, but it is my understanding from speaking to a few of those involved that that deadline is going to be extended to April 1st. So that would leave the committee 1 month from today. It's also, I understand it's going to be taken up at the next town council meeting, which is March 9th. It'll be formally addressed, and that's also after our next scheduled meeting. So given the assumption of that April 1st deadline, I kind of thought it was wise we convene, kind of talk about what this deliverable is going to look like and how we get there in the next month. So we're not in a position tonight to really talk about the details of the scenarios. That's on the agenda for next meeting when we get the updated information from Mylone and McBroom, and we can get into the details then. But to be clear, with the mission statement of the committee, we will present to the town council and the Board of Ed on or before that date that they provide. And it's up to us over the next month to kind of decide what that presentation is going to include. So that is where we are at from my understanding. Is there any discussion or comment from the committee on the April 1st deadline first? Go ahead, Ann.
Did somebody else have their hand up before me, Chuck? I saw Jim's
I
hand.
saw yours first, so just go ahead, and if there was,
Okay,
fire away next.
I kind of wanted to hear from Renee because back weeks ago, he was discussing an outline of the report, and I'm just wondering, Renee, if you have added to that or worked on it at all, and if we as a committee can come up with a plan for the actual putting together some of the, it seems to me that that back information is something that could, you know, how we went through the process is something that absolutely could be done while we're waiting for updated information.
Understood. And real quick, that I do have that info from Renee. We can pull up and discuss. Just any comment on the April 1st deadline? Is anybody any issues with that? We can get into the details of the deliverable from there. All right, so yeah, that was actually kind of next on my list here to pull up and present. Let me try and share my desktop here, because I do have that, and we can kind of talk about where to go from there. And Renee, I will give you the floor to respond to Ann's comment. So this is the details of what we had from your email. I believe it was on February 1st after a meeting previously.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Yeah, no, and I have not worked further on this. I think we should find a way of cobbling this together. Perhaps, if I may suggest, I think there's a number of these items that would probably going to be compiled by Colliers, and I think after we distill those items from this list, then maybe we can split up amongst committee members which sections team members could take the lead on, and then have a meeting to compile them. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, Renee, to that end, and I'm sorry, I can't see everybody fully here, but I had talked to Chuck kind of about how this would come together. And since they have a lot of the information, they agreed to, kind of put it together based on an outline that we kind of come up with. And we could talk about the meetings and timelines and some milestones to meet over the next month to get there.
Mhm.
The idea from Colliers was if we came up with this timeline, they could kind of fill in the blanks, and we'd review drafts over the next several meetings with a final review of the committee. I believe it was on the 29th, and report delivered to the town council on the 1st, if that is the date. So that's the other way to go about it. Go ahead, Ann.
Who would be delivering the report? Would it be Colliers or would it be us? Somebody else?
That's another thing that we can discuss. In my mind, I think it was, I would always thought it would be maybe an introduction from the school modernization committee of what we had done to date, big picture, bringing Colliers on board, and then let Colliers deliver some of the details of the scenarios. But again, it's up to us in here. So does anybody have any other thoughts? Did I lose you guys?
Chuck, it's
So-
funny, I'm
so
not
you're
sure if anyone
saying-
else raised their hand. I think Jim was going to say something earlier.
Oh, I just had a question regarding when I think we had asked to see some of the new numbers before our March 8th meeting. I just wanted to know if we were going to get that in the next day or so, or what the timeline is.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know what happened to my video. Yeah, so the SLR has the updated information, compiling everything that we had talked about at our last meeting. So we have a full package of info for the March 8th meeting. We'll have that this week for the meeting next week.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me, Chuck, just to clarify, Jim, the intent is to get that to everybody Wednesday or Thursday at the very latest this week.
Okay, great.
Hey, Chuck, I had a comment about the delivery of the report.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I would suggest that when the report is ready, that this entire committee, maybe it's a joint meeting with the town council, come together.
Mhm.
Probably do this on Zoom, deliver a report as a team, let folks take the lead on some points, let Colliers talk about it, but all the work this committee's put into it, I think it'd be a great show of force and a great way to wrap up that part of it by sitting in and showing the town council what we came up with. That way they can ask questions, get some feedback, and then I'm sure they're going to go off and do their studying, and the board does its own as well.
Agreed. I kind of thought of it as, providing the information ahead of time in the form of the report and then an actual formal presentation and a joint meeting via Zoom following that. Does that sound reasonable? Do we need to provide that ahead of time? I would think yes.
If the committee can put that report together, I think the sooner town council gets it, the sooner they can review it and come prepared with questions.
I'm sorry I was late, Chuck, but I agree with
no
that.
problem.
I think it's helpful to have the information, if we can, before the formal presentation. That gives us an opportunity to answer questions or ask questions.
Got it. Yeah, so again, we'll get into meeting dates and stuff at the end, but high level, talking with Chuck, just prepping for the meeting here, we had said if we delivered that report on April 1st, and the presentation would be the following Monday, which I believe is the 5th, which would be our regularly scheduled SMC meeting anyhow. That would be the plan. As far as content for the thing, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
I actually had something for the content.
Yeah.
We had put down the future enrollment projections as one of the bullets initially. And I think it's important that that we also include the information about the space standard numbers. I think they really need to explain that because that was a big surprise to the committee, what that meant and how that changed our scenarios. So will you make sure when you do the enrollment projections that you also add in the space standards?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just using this as a working document. Thank you, Kate. Go ahead, Matt.
The space or the actual future enrollment, how is that being based? I know it's coming from Mylona McBroom, but is it coming, there's usually a high, low, and a medium. Is that correct? Which of those are we going to use?
Correct. So we'll get into the details of the actual numbers and how they came up with them. But my understanding is there is a high, low, and a medium. They've recommended that we use the high for planning purposes as you kind of look at the long-term plan, and you kind of base that the school size on, I believe it was 90% of that, just for planning purposes. The actual enrollment of the schools, which they'll get into next week again, is breaking that large number down into how it actually fits into the schools over the time frame. So taking whatever that projection was and saying you have X number of students going to these different places is a little simplified because it doesn't really get into the class sizes themselves. So they're going to be looking at the schools, and that's what we're going to be going over next week.
Yeah, I was just wondering what number they were going to use. So they're going to use the high number, and that's what we're going to propose to the state.
Correct. John.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the high number out of those three options is what they are using for their projections.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead, Don.
Hey, John, is that what the state requires us to do, is to use the high number, or is that just something we're going to?
They typically do ask that you use that number, Don, because that factors into the space standards and subsequently the potential size of the schools. So if you end up using the low number and ultimately your numbers end up being higher than that, your schools could be undersized once, almost like too late in the process. So that
Right, but the state is requiring us to use the high number, or we're using it because we don't want to. I just want to make sure everybody understands the state is requiring that, or is it something that we are?
No, the state doesn't require that, but they strongly suggest using that number.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we had that understood. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Right. Is there anything else particular to the presentation, table of contents outline that we want to ensure we include and sort out here over this next month? Details of the scenarios aside, obviously we'll figure that part out starting next week with the enrollment by schools, but big picture.
Can you
Go
put
ahead.
it back up quick?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You got the table of contents, right?
Yes.
Is there any other inclusions, exclusions anybody felt? Go ahead, Don.
Just in terms of the survey results that will be in there, will it just be the results from the phone calls, or will it be the results from the online ones and the phone calls? I'm assuming these are going to be two separate surveys. One of the ones that people took online and one that was done over the phone, but that would have to be broken down and explained as well, correct? The methodology.
Yeah, I'd say the details of the survey we'll talk about when we get to the communications. I think it's
Okay.
in the next item there. But
Okay.
yeah, we can talk about how to include that based on whatever report we get from the vendor there.
Okay.
As far as conclusions and recommendations, I mean, kind of based on where we are at, I believe we could present, two scenarios that are valid to the committee and may not necessarily, or to the town and not necessarily select one final one. I'm not sure if anybody has any feelings or opinions on presenting one versus a couple of scenarios that we feel meet the goal of school modernization. Go ahead, Matt.
I would just like to back up to benefit to the community. And I think that's something that we really should look at fairly in depth. At the point that what we're proposing now is either an elementary school or a middle school. If we propose an elementary school, that's really going to take care of about 18 to 20% of the population, the student population. And I'm just going to correlate that into the benefit to the community of 20%. In the first phase, and the town council has asked us to go further than that and go into, our future phases, even though we're not going to be, or they're not going to be voting on it. I just think that it only benefiting 20% of the community, and we know our schools are in complete disarray, I shouldn't say disarray, but they're in need of some, at worst TLC and at best some serious maintenance. And we in our first phase, or in the phase that we're going to present, we haven't presented anything, or we haven't discussed what we should do for each school to get them so that they're up to code. They're up to the standards, especially the COVID standards today. We can speak of code and you can speak of COVID. COVID is COVID recommendations. I don't think any of our schools today meet our COVID recommendations. And I think it's something that we need to discuss for all the schools. I know the schools are going through safety and security, but I think that's important for each one of these schools. We're going to put all our efforts into an elementary school and a middle school, and then 3 or 4 years down the road, we're going to address the rest of the schools as they come up. And I think maybe we should take a look at it. I know it's late, but benefit to the community. The higher the percentage of people that we can benefit, I think the better off we're going to be. And I think we really need to, at worst case scenarios, take a very quick look at some of these schools and take a look at that Eastman report and see exactly what's been done and what needs to be done to help these schools out and to benefit more of the population of the town of Cheshire.
Thank you, Matt. Go ahead, Don. You want to respond to that?
Well, let's not forget phase one also had to do a complete reno on Dodge. So it would increase it by a little bit more than 20% if we do a complete reno of Dodd as well in that phase. And I would propose to putting back the Humiston. I know we removed it a week or two ago, but I think Humiston needs to be part of phase one. It's an important part, in my opinion. And I think we never really took a vote on it. It was kind of, despite what people said, it was unanimous. I know I voiced my displeasure with removing it from phase one, and I think that's something that should be put back in. I think by adding those, looking at those, we're dealing with more than just 20% of the school population in that fact.
Thanks, Don. I would just say I agree with both your comments as far as looking at the scenarios a little bit deeper and kind of looking at them in that light of the benefits to the community. I would say I don't think, again, we're in a position to talk about the scenarios in detail tonight until we see what they look like with any updated enrollment and stuff next week. But that is the main agenda item for next week, that we can get into the details of what to include, what not to include, and if we want to take a vote on what we're excluding in certain phases, that's certainly something we can do as a committee at that point. Thank you both.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Chuck.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks. So going back to your original question, should we offer up one scenario or one option or two options? I would like to see as a counselor, I would kind of like to see what the SMCs, what our kind of best solution or best option is, what we think our the SMC's best option is, and then have a backup. That would be, as a counselor, that would be my sort of preference. Whether we can come to an agreement, or enough of us can come to an agreement on what that best option is another question, I guess. But and we'll start to get into that more next week. But just from my perspective, from being on the town council and knowing that the SMC has worked as long as they've worked on this, I think it would be beneficial to the council to have our recommendation and then have a backup or a secondary recommendation as a way to present this to the council. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Jim. Saw another hand go up there. Ann, go ahead.
I agree with what Jim just said, and I was just going to suggest, I don't know that we can really know whether we have two options or one option until we see what happens with the numbers that we'll see next week or later this week.
Understood. Thank you, Ann. Go ahead, Kate. Then Rich, then Andrew.
I agree with Don. I know he's mentioned bringing in Humiston, putting it back in phase one to a vote. Is that something we can do tonight, or is that something that you want to look at for next week?
Yeah, I think if we could hold off any of the scenario details, discussion, and everything to next week, when we all have the same information to prepare off of, and we're all in a position to just talk about scenarios at one time, I think would be the best move.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Rich.
When we meet next week, will we have updated financial numbers from Jim Justcott?
John, I don't believe that was planned, right? I believe the intent next week is we're going to get the update from Mylone and McBroom, or SLR, as they are now. We're going to get that information, see what that's done to the scenarios, and I believe there is going to be some discussion needed on the scenarios, offshoots that would, better frame what we're looking for from the financial side, if you will. I think if you just ran the financial part right now, it's going to change based on conversation next week, is what I'm thinking. So I would hold off on that until then.
Right, that was my understanding too, Chuck, is that we would wait until the discussion on the 8th, and then based on that, reestablish the cash flows or the financial impacts with Jim Jascott at that point.
But we will have those numbers before we're called on to make a recommendation.
Correct. After the meeting next week, if there's any offshoots or iterations of the scenarios, that would be prepared over the following week. And we have a regularly scheduled meeting on March 17th, where we'd hopefully have the update from whatever we come up with next week off of the presentation and the financial part of that. Talking to Chuck with the model, let's say, for the cash flow kind of setup, it's not as large of an undertaking as before, albeit still some work. So, Andrew, I think you were next, and then go ahead, Sylvia, after that.
Yeah, it's back to the what we're going to deliver to the town council. I think that once we have the final enrollment projections and we have the budgetary numbers from Jim Jascott, that we as a committee vote and come up with exactly what we want in each of the scenarios before we forward it to the town council. We go in as a uniform group as much as we possibly can. I think that's important.
Very good. So I think just based on the schedule, hang on, so I think based on the schedule that next week, we could, again, talk about the scenarios, and then on the 17th, maybe be in a better position to kind of finalize what we're including in the phase as a group by voting through it. And the financial stuff would come from there as well. So go ahead, Sylvia.
Yeah, I agree with everything everybody said. Jim, your position about having two scenarios to look at is well taken. I think that it would behoove us to present our best presentation after we have the financials and all of the enrollment things, but also have a second one that offers the opportunity to have some conversation and the council perhaps and the Board of Education to see why we ended up determining the one we just choose, whatever it is, because that opens up some of the questions and perhaps makes the answers more clear to see why we ended up with the particular one that we did. Recognizing that once it is beyond this committee, whichever one comes forward, the Board of Education and the Town Council will have their own ideas as to how that might change or might not. But I think I agree that there should be the major one that we've decided on, and then a backup one just to have good conversation, good questions.
Very good. Thank you, Sylvia. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what Sylvia said, but I agree. Best one, backup one, some options. Also for the discussion of voting on these options when the time comes. I believe the spreadsheets we filled out that we ranked all the options, a couple months ago, is still relevant. I don't think the data has changed there, and the phases may be slightly different. But I would like to have that, as part of our discussion. All the data behind these two options should be available to us. The idea is keep it as best as possible discussion based on the data and the facts that led to all this, more than subjective. And I think it's going to play an important role, especially when it's delivered to the town council and the Board of Ed, so they can also look at the same data and facts, and we can have a relative discussion on those facts. That's all. I think we have everything. I don't know if we can collect all the documents and data and enrollment studies and options lists in one place on OneDrive if it's not already there. But if we have that handy for the meeting and easy to look up, I think it'll make the meeting go a little smoother as well. That's all. Make 2 cents.
Thank you, Tony.
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, sorry. Just to follow up what Tony just said, the the data, I think, is still from the rankings we did is certainly still valid. I do think that those, when we looked at those, for example, we were kind of comparing, one option was the new middle school, one option was a new elementary school, but I don't think if I recall, we weren't really comparing a new elementary school plus a reno of Dodd, and we weren't, versus a new middle school plus a new elementary school. So those first phases did sort of, mushroom a little bit since we looked at those rankings. I don't know if we want to maybe look at those again and re-rank them or something. Although it is kind of only two options at this point. We do, as we've said from the very beginning, we do want to always be thinking about the fiscal impact and the first phases. I know we want to try and get sort of as far down the road as we possibly can, but I'm a little concerned, as I said before, I'm a little concerned that we're front loading a little bit too much and maybe expecting a little bit too much of the voters and the taxpayers in this first phase. So, I don't know if we want to sort of re-rank these new first phases we have, or do we want to kind of continue to move forward with basically a new middle school versus a new elementary school?
Yeah, I will say that the score sheet that we had all completed really took us from 13 scenarios down to roughly 2. Granted, some of them were very similar, but let's say we have 2 scenarios. I think what would be beneficial is if we look at each scenario and we make it the best possible that kind of fits the main idea of the scenario as far as elementary school in the first phase versus middle school in the first phase. We do that to each one and kind of step out what the phases would be. And then we look at them versus each other and we select which one we think is the best between the 2 overall. So we're giving each equal merit, understanding that, they each have their own details to them. But if we can look at each one, phase by phase and kind of make it the best possible scenario for that particular one, and then do that to scenario 2, and then we can take a vote as a committee which one we are recommending over the other, and still be left with one that we're not upset with, let's say,
Jim,
as a backup. Go ahead, Tony.
Jim, thanks. Yeah, I forgot. It was after we did that ranking. It's the same options except that both phase ones were front loaded with things we do in later phases, so that's why it mushroomed out a little bit.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's worthwhile to go back and break them back out into separate phases again from phase 1. If we could just say, we got a discussion on those 2 options and maybe leave a spreadsheet out of it at this point. The one thing, and again, I apologize, I don't remember seeing this, was the financial rating ever filled out for those options? Remember we had a column of those for.
I don't think it was.
No, the cash flow analysis that Jim Jascott had put together followed our scoring of that, and it was separate.
Okay.
The ranking of that, 1 through 4 would be, subjective based on whatever we input. But I think if we go back and look at the scenarios, and as you said, just put them side by side, and we can go through phase by phase and what includes what, look at the cost and everything, and kind of go from there. Again, doing this, next week after we've got the updated information and, see what they actually look like.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep. So I guess what I'm hearing is it seems like the majority would rather see one recommendation with a backup scenario. Is there anybody disagrees with that? All right. Again, we can finalize this table of contents next week. I'll shoot this out with the information for the meeting for next week. If you have any comments between now and then, let anyone know, and we can include it and hopefully finalize an outline at least for Colliers to take for some of the presentation to fill out. So, everybody good? All right. Moving on to item number 5, discussion regarding the communications subcommittee. So communications subcommittee established early on, well, maybe a little bit later, to kind of educate the public on goings on with the SMC, where we're at in the process, et cetera. I think the biggest undertaking has been the survey, which is closed. And from what I understand in the email today, Rich, they are ready to present the findings of as soon as Thursday of this week. You have any comment on the survey?
Yeah, survey is done. There were, as you recall, there were 400 phone calls made throughout the community based on a statistical breakdown, so that they made sure that those phone calls mirrored the town in terms of age, gender, and other factors. We advertised also the online access that people had. We had hoped to get as many as 1,000. We thought that was really shooting high, but we ended up with 903 online people who filled it out. And of those 903, 100 of them are business people. Now, when I talked to Jerry, he said that the report will contain 3 columns, and it will lay out what the responses were for the phone callers, the online people, and break out the business discussion separately. That we'll be getting 2 different pieces. There is a detailed report that goes through all the numbers and summarizes what some of the findings are. And then there'll also be a PowerPoint presentation that we'll be able to use with the committee and potentially with the Town Council Board of Ed. All of that is due to us on Thursday morning. We're going to have a meeting of the Communications Committee to take a look at it Thursday evening. I haven't spoken to Chuck yet about when he wants us to present it all to the full committee. Jerry will take the lead on that, and he said it'll take about an hour to go through an analysis of all the data and run that detail through. He was very positive when I spoke to him. He said there was not a huge variance between the phone callers and the online people, which he said is generally what they have found. He said every once in a while you may have a community where there is a very active group on one side or the other, and it skews the online survey. But he said in general that wasn't the case here, that they were pretty much in line. So we, I guess, drew a good cross section. And that's where we're at right now. I haven't seen the numbers yet. Just, conversation with Jerry on it, and we'll all get to take a look at it in the next week.
Thank you, Rich. The presentation on Thursday, Matt, hang on one second. The presentation on Thursday to the Communications Subcommittee, that's the full hour presentation from Jerry, or what's the intent of that presentation?
That's just for us to take a look at it. It'll be a first look. So we'll have the report, and we'll have the PowerPoint, and the Communication Committee will have an opportunity to go through and ask questions. If there's anything that we want changed in the report, or anything that we're unclear on, before it gets presented to the full committee and anyone else that we want to present it to. So this is just a first look. It's coming to us on Thursday morning. We're taking a look at it on Thursday evening.
Got it. Go ahead, Matt.
First look or 10th look. This committee should have the information that you have at the same time that you have it. We shouldn't get information that's been tweaked by any committee. We are a committee to ourselves. And that information is important to us as it is to the Communication Committee. So I would hope that this entire committee gets the information that you get at the same time that you get it.
Thank you, Matt. I would just say if in the interest of time, we have a month left. And if you're getting the report on Thursday at the communications subcommittee meeting, that's what you just sent out, right? That's an open meeting anyhow. Is it possible that we make that a joint meeting or an SMC meeting where we can all kind of take it in? And if you can't attend that on Thursday at 6:30, it is streamed. We can watch the video and we can have a follow-up on the meeting on Monday. Is anybody opposed to that?
Or we could also perhaps, I don't know, Rich, you could have Jerry just whatever he's going to email to you on Thursday, just email it to all of us, right?
I don't have any problem with everybody seeing it. It's, the
Yeah.
idea here was that this is a first look at the thing, that the committee that went to this group and asked that we do this, at least have an opportunity to take a look at it before it comes to the full committee. That's standard operating procedure in almost any subcommittee or group that I've ever worked with. If this group wants to do it differently, that's fine.
I understand, Rich. I would just, send it to the whole committee knowing that it's a draft and that folks shouldn't have a initial reaction until, your subcommittee's work is complete. Just in essence of time, I'm worried that with less than, 4 weeks to go, the sooner we get information, the more we can get you feedback.
Yeah, that's all I was looking to do is if he's providing a presentation anyhow that is streamed at a public meeting of the communications subcommittee, if we can just double down on that effort, attend and or watch that before our next meeting and provide comment at one time, it seems like we'd be saving an hour of presentation from him later on at an SMC meeting. That's all I was getting to. Go ahead, Don. I saw your hand go up there.
Yeah, I want to agree with what Tony just said. I think it's important, and what Matt said, that we all see it. I mean, to tweak it and to take things out, I think is unfair to the rest of this committee, because I think it's something that we should all look at and see it. And if the subcommittee wants to take something out, at least we know what was there originally, and we can understand that. So. But yeah, I agree. And if we can attend on Thursday, we should all get the link to attend that meeting as well.
Go ahead, Sylvia. You're muted.
Got to get the right one. I agree. I don't think I have any concern that they see it ahead of time, but as a committee member, I'm busy with a lot of other things. And if I have the materials to look at in advance, it helps me to be able to think through my reactions to them. So I agree that I think it should be open to all of us to at least observe and listen to whatever the committee's comments are. I have no problem with that. But I think we are up against a time frame, and the more information we can get ahead of time, the better off we can be to making a good decision.
Agreed. Thank you, Sylvia. Does anybody else have any comment on the survey portion? Kate, has your hand up? Oh, sorry. Okay. Anything else regarding the communications subcommittee as a whole? I had a couple.
No, we haven't had
questions
any
here.
meetings recently. We did have, or we do have a letter to the editor program. We put that on hold last week because the letters that we were writing were based on capacity figures, and we did not want to be putting anything out that would cause any confusion. So we've held some of the material that we had ready to go out. After next week, once we've got some clarification as to what some of the latest information is, then we'll start gearing that back up again.
Very good. I had just one question in general for the communications subcommittee. So following the deliverable to the town council of the report and presentation, the school modernization committee has met its fulfillment of the mission, which as a subcommittee of school modernization, communications would as well. So has there been any thought, or maybe you guys could add this to the agenda for Thursday, of how you're going to transfer some of the work that we've done already as far as the social media, et cetera, once we kind of get to the end there?
Yeah, well, I mean, we had some early conversations, and there were some people out in the community who had talked about, coming together and doing some public relations work, forming a pack of their own and things. I have no idea at this point where any of that is at, and it was suggested to me that we really should not be involved with that process. So I know that, we go out of business when the committee goes out of business. All the data that we have, all the information that we have is available to any community groups that should form and be interested in pursuing, the PR effort. And I'd be more than glad to walk them through where the information is and how to reach it, but not certain where we go at that point, because as you said, we're out of business at that point. We've put stuff out there, we've tried to communicate as best we can, but there's a certain point where others in the community then have to pick up the ball.
Go ahead, Sylvia and Jim. You're muted again, Sylvia.
So that my dogs won't interfere. Sorry. I think it's important that we keep the community apprised of what's going on, but I think the minute this goes to Board of Education and the Town Council, there's going to be an awful lot of meetings and conversation before there is a final determination of what will go to referendum. And I think if this project is going to be successful, and if we can learn any lessons from the wonderful pack that was in South Windsor, I went back and looked at that communications stuff. You probably have it as well, Rich, that the major printable information that they put out. But I think that it's important not to put out information that is not fully vetted and stir up issues which can't maybe be changed, or which will in some way deter the completion of the project as it's being worked on by the Board of Ed and the Town Council. So I think that, yes, we need to say the committee has delivered these two scenarios, the one that we prefer and the backup one, to the council and the Board of Ed. Let the council and the Board of Ed have their public meetings and have that be certainly available to anybody in the public. But before there is a major push to support whatever the finding is, I think it needs to be organized and clear exactly what the Board of Ed and the Town Council are going to bring to a public hearing, which will happen at some point in time before the referendum. And that's the time when all of that concentrated information should go out. I honestly think that there's a small group of people who are following this very closely, and there's a lot of people who keep saying, I'm tired of listening to it right now. Just come up with a proposal for me when it's done and tell me why I need to do it, and then convince me that that's the right thing. And so I think there's a fine line between over publicizing and maybe putting people off as there is to encouraging them. And that's not the council or the Board of Ed's job. It is not our committee's job after this. So I think we have to just be careful about how we do it. I'm fully in support of making sure the public is aware of what's going on. But I think we have to be very careful about how that happens if we want this to be successful. And I, for one, would like it to be successful, because I don't want to go to a lot more of these meetings. This is really good. We've done a good job. We've worked hard, and we've come up with a plan. So let's get it to work. But let's not shoot ourselves in the foot by being over anxious to publicize something which might possibly tweak or have a change here and there and cause people to question whether we're sure of what we're doing.
And we've, been putting information onto our Facebook page and
Yeah.
some other instruments that we have, but it's all factual in nature, it's not opinion.
That's true. That's true. But the facts change, and we know that the facts have been changed several times on this committee. So as much as the facts we put out, some of the facts have changed, and now we've changed the way we're counting the enrollment and the capacity of the buildings, and people don't always read those changes. So that's my concern. That's all.
And as I said, I don't know at what point we will go out of business. Will the town council at some point take a formal vote that says we now accept the report and thank you all for your hard work and you now are done? If that's the case, then as of that moment, our communications committee obviously is done also. Until that point, we'll try to get some good factual information out to the community, so at least they're aware of some of the process. I know last time when there was some recommendations made, I remember talking to Ann after the fact, and I was surprised because I didn't realize that along with the new middle school, that there were certain buildings that might close. There were some savings that were there. Now, maybe that was my fault. I wasn't involved enough, but I wanted to make sure, at least this time around, that people realized a little more complexity than just we want to build X.
Right.
There's more pieces to that, and the bottom line finances are all affected by those various pieces that we've got out there. So that's all we're trying to do. And there's been a couple of things. I wrote one thing that I sent to Vin and to Jeff, and they came back saying, no, there's some opinion in here, and I scrapped it. I just threw it out. So as we've been working, we've tried to keep it as factual and detailed as we can.
I appreciate that, but I think we need to continue that and not get ahead of ourselves. That's all.
Thank you both. Go ahead, Jim. You had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the idea that the SMC is going to be going out of business soon. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. I think as we, I mean, we're going to deliver the report to the council and the board of ed, but the council and board of ed is still going to want our thoughts and they'll have questions and they'll still want some guidance from us as well as this goes on. So just for everyone on the committee, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at April 1st as necessarily the day that the SMC goes out of business. So it'll be a collaborative effort going forward beyond April 1st. There'll be plenty more work to do and plenty more questions ahead and stuff. So just for everyone's edification, that's just to have that in mind that our work isn't necessarily done in a month. So
thank you, Jim. Go ahead, Kate.
I do have a question for when we do get to that point where we transition between our work to, if there's a PAC, whoever that PAC becomes, like, are we allowed to have somebody else take over the Facebook page and the Twitter, and so they can capitalize on those 550 followers or what, like, is that allowed for them and just take us off completely and then it becomes their entity, or is that not allowed?
That was actually my original question. That's what I was wondering. I didn't know if you guys had talked about that initially, if maybe you want to talk about that at your next meeting and maybe look into the details of how that works with the town.
Yeah, I think you got a legal question there that might have to be answered, but I mean, we would have no problem in handing it off to someone, but if another group then came up saying, well, why did you hand it to them and not to us? You could have an issue there. So I think we may have to talk to a town attorney or something just to make sure that we're covered.
Yes, agreed. Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, that's, I was going to suggest that we talk to the town attorney about handling, we set things up as a committee, whether it be a subcommittee or the full committee, and for someone else to take over what we've done, I think that there needs to be a legal opinion. The question I kind of have, I guess it's for the town manager. Sean's been sitting there through so many meetings, and I have a question for him. Sean, at the referendum, do the taxpayers or just the voters have the ability to vote on a referendum?
Let's see, I believe it's the electors. So I believe if you, Arnett, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have to consult the charter, but I believe it's both, correct, Arnett?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If someone who is not a resident of the town of Cheshire but pays a significant amount of taxes, and I don't know what the minimum, maximum, I don't know what those guidelines are, that person can petition to vote in a referendum that impacts budgetary items because they pay over a certain threshold in taxes. I believe we've had that happen maybe twice in the last 15, 20 years or so, but that is a possibility.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's why I was just trying to clarify it, that this might not just be something that the electorate or voters of Cheshire, but the taxpayers of Cheshire have the ability to vote on.
Yeah, it
Thank
varies
you.
town to town, but we'll confirm and we can share that information with the committee for sure.
Okay. Is there anything else related to the communications subcommittee meeting on Thursday? Rich, go ahead, Don.
I just had one thing, comment to make. I have to agree wholeheartedly with what Sylvia was saying. You know, facts are good to put out there. Opinions are not, and we have to be cautious of that. You know, although you're walking a thin line sometimes between facts and opinions, we just have to make sure that we all want something to happen here. At the end of the day, whatever is decided on, hopefully we can all get behind it and hope that it will get passed. This is what I'm hoping for. And as of April 1st, there's no guarantee that this group will still be around. It could be, but there's no guarantee that it will be. It could be in some form. But if you think about it, you're adding 10 more people to this group. At 13, it's already full. Add another 10 people onto it. It could get a little crazy having 23 people dealing with these issues. So I don't know what the council is going to decide on that, but you know, I'm sure that there will be a vote at one point to say thank you and we appreciate everybody's work, but it may happen on April 1st. It may happen down the line, but I would assume that until the town council votes on that, then this group is still intact and we will continue to do whatever is asked by the town council. So.
Thank you, Don. All right. Just to put a bow on the communications subcommittee discussion. So Rich, the presentation that you'll have on Thursday for your meeting, you'll forward that to the full committee and we will may be able to attend since it is open, and we can have discussion on that presentation on Monday to kind of fulfill the presentation of that to the committee. Does that, everybody agree with that? Does anybody disagree? Go ahead, Ann.
I just would say about everybody attending, we had to squeeze this meeting in. We only have an hour before I have another meeting. And that's why we decided on Thursday at 6:30. And so.
You muted yourself.
Yeah, I saw that. So I have a little bit of a problem if we're going to let everybody come in and have discussion for this very limited time.
Yeah, I wasn't proposing that everybody
wholeheartedly-
comes in and has discussion. I was
I
proposing that everybody
wholeheartedly
goes.
agree with getting the materials out to everybody because everybody should be able to see what we're seeing, even if it is in draft form. But in terms of the discussion for that hour, we're on a really tight schedule. But so, you know, whatever we agree to is fine with me, but.
Thank you, Ann. To be clear, I wasn't proposing that we all attend for a full discussion at the meeting on Thursday. The presentation be forwarded to the full committee so everybody has a chance to review it, attend and or watch the tape of the subcommittee meeting prior to our meeting next Monday and be prepared to have any discussion related to the survey results at that point.
And I will
That's
have, I'll have asked Jerry to attend our meeting next Monday to respond to any questions. As I said, his plan was to go through the entire PowerPoint with this group, which he said would take an hour. I'm not certain under our present conversation whether that will work or not. But we'll see on Thursday once we get a chance to take a look at everything.
I guess my assumption was you would be going through that full PowerPoint presentation with your subcommittee on Thursday, which would take
Yeah,
care of everyone seeing it. Is that right?
that wasn't the original plan. The original plan, we would have the documents in front of us. He would summarize and we would have a chance to ask him some questions before we brought it to the full committee and went through the full presentation.
Gotcha.
So as Ann said, originally, this was going to be a shorter meeting, an hour total, with both the report and the PowerPoint presentation. So if the PowerPoint alone takes an hour, I'll talk to Jerry and see how we can restructure.
Thank you, Rich. Anybody else got any final comment there? All right. Moving on to the next item, next meeting dates and topics. So our next meeting is currently scheduled for 1 week from tonight, 7 o'clock, same place. That'll be the Malone and McBroom, or SLR as they are called now, their presentation of the enrollment breakdown by school. And we will discuss how that affects the scenarios and get into a detailed discussion of each scenario and phasing. All right. We can have a follow-up discussion on any land or site if that is required. And we'll finalize the outline for Collier's presentation and report. Following that, there is a meeting with OSCGNR on March 11th. This is a follow-up to an introductory meeting that was held, I want to say it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, that they had requested the follow-up. Essentially, they have the original information. They would be provided the enrollment information from Malone and McBroom, and it's really just kind of the next step of their deeper dive into the data. At that meeting was Collier's, Malone and McBroom, and the main contact from OSCGNR with our group is the Board of Ed, so Superintendent Solon had attended, and also Vin Masiana. In addition, I had planned to attend, and given the handoff to the town council, I think it would be beneficial if a town council member also attended to hear the information as well. So we'd be looking for that. Again, it's on March 11th. It's currently planned as a 3 to 4 hour meeting in the morning. So I can follow up with Sylvia. I think you had expressed interest in that in the past.
I attended the first meeting, so I have a basic understanding of how that went. I don't see myself, any town council person, participating so much in the meeting as being an observer, basically, and just listening to see how the school people should be much more involved with the discussion. So.
Correct. That's my understanding of the role there, and it's really just for continuity as this thing goes forward.
And
somebody being involved there. So
issue about that, I have the time because luckily for me, I'm retired from a job. So, but I'm happy if somebody else, Jim or Don, wants to take that over. But
It's all yours, Sylvia, in my opinion.
Yeah, I second your motion. So
okay.
Very good. The next meeting following that for this committee, our regularly scheduled meeting, is Wednesday, March 17th. Again, 7 o'clock.
We have to wear green.
You may wear green. Be as festive.
Can we
as
have
you would,
Guinness?
you'd like. No comment. So the tentative agenda for that would be, Colliers would have a presentation and update on the scenario discussion from next week's meeting. And they'd also have a draft of the presentation or report to the town council based on our outline that we provide next week. Any comments on that, we'd filter back through. And the following meeting, the last meeting of this committee prior to presentation would be Monday, March 29th, with the intent of Colliers running through full details of the financial information and their final draft of the presentation that would be given to the town council, delivered on April 1st, presented via meeting on April 5th, Monday, which would be the regular schedule of this. Is there any questions, comments there? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Don.
just quick, Arnett, are these upcoming meetings conflict with any of the budget meetings for the council? I just want to make sure.
That's what I'm looking for right now.
Okay.
Or the Board of Ed, do they have other?
So the only meeting that isn't regular schedule for this would be the Monday, March 29th meeting.
The council tentatively has a budget workshop scheduled for Thursday, April 1st, Tuesday, April 6th, so there's no issue with the April 5th meeting. So we would be okay. March 17th, there is no budget in case we wanted to combine them. For any reason, on March 29th, there is no budget, so.
Thank you.
I don't know the Board of Ed schedule, but we're okay with the multitude of budget workshops we've got scheduled coming up.
The Board of Ed has a March 11th planning committee meeting of the whole, actually to talk about these two options, and the regular business meeting March 18th. So I think we're good.
Actually, Tony, we have curriculum next Monday. But we could probably ask to move that, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could probably move it to Tuesday. I'll talk with Faith and Marlene tomorrow.
Very good. Go ahead, Matt.
I would just request that the financial information be presented to this committee as soon as possible. So as soon as it's received or Collier receives it, that we should have it as soon as possible, because that is probably one of the more important links in this entire presentation or entire SMC.
Agreed. Thank you, Matt. We'll make sure we get it as soon as we can, and we'll talk next week kind of what effect any of the scenarios or changes might have on that. So plan is to have it ahead of time, as you suggest. Anybody else got any questions, comments on meeting dates, topics, anything else to include in these meetings that maybe we didn't touch on a high level there? Very good. That gets us through the agenda. So would entertain a motion to adjourn if there is nothing else.
So moved.
Don, thank you. Second by Jim. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week, and look in your email Wednesday or Thursday this week for info.